Chapter 5. Trip to Austin, promotion to full second lieutenant, Army of Occupation. When our party left Corpus Christi, it was quite large, including the cavalry escort, paymaster, Major Dix, his clerk, and the officers who, like myself, were simply on leave, but all the officers on leave, except Lieutenant Benjamin, afterwards killed in the Valley of Mexico, Lieutenant, now General, Augur, and myself, concluded to spend their allotted time at San Antonio, and return from there. We were all to be back at Corpus Christi by the end of the month. The paymaster was detained in Austin so long that, if we had waited for him, we would have exceeded our leave. We concluded, therefore, to start back at once with the animals we had, and having to rely principally on grass for their food, it was a good 6 days' journey. We had to sleep on the prairie every night, except at Goliad, and possibly one night on the Colorado, without shelter and with only such food as we carried with us and prepared ourselves. The journey was hazardous on account of Indians, and there were white men in Texas whom I would not have cared to meet in a secluded place. Lieutenant Augur was taken seriously sick before we reached Goliad and at a distance from any habitation. To add to the complication, his horse, a Mustang that had probably been captured from the band of wild horses before alluded to, and of undoubted longevity at his capture, gave out. It was absolutely necessary to get forward to Goliad to find a shelter for our sick companion. By dint of patience and exceedingly slow movements, Goliad was at last reached, and a shelter and bed secured for our patient. We remained over a day, hoping that Augur might recover sufficiently to resume his travels. He did not, however, and knowing that Major Dix would be along in a few days, with his wagon train, now empty, and escort, we arranged with our Louisiana friend to take the best of care of the sick lieutenant until thus relieved, and went on. You are listening this book at VolantLife Radio. I had never been a sportsman in my life, had scarcely ever gone in search of game, and rarely seen anyone looking for it. On this trip, there was no minute of time while traveling between San Patricio and the settlements on the San Antonio River, from San Antonio to Austin, and again from the Colorado River back to San Patricio, when deer or antelope could not be seen in great numbers. Each officer carried a shotgun, and every evening, after going into camp, some would go out and soon return, with venison and wild turkeys enough for the entire camp. I, however, never went out, and had no occasion to fire my gun, except, being detained over a day at Goliad, Benjamin and I concluded to go down to the creek, which was fringed with timber, much of it the pecan, and bring back a few turkeys. We had scarcely reached the edge of the timber when I heard the flutter of wings overhead, and in an instant I saw 2 or 3 turkeys flying away. These were soon followed by more, then more, and more, until a flock of 20 or 30 had left from just over my head. All this time I stood watching the turkeys to see where they flew, with my gun on my shoulder, and never once thought of leveling it at the birds. When I had time to reflect upon the matter, I came to the conclusion that as a sportsman I was a failure, and went back to the house. Benjamin remained out, and got as many turkeys as he wanted to carry back. After the second night at Goliad, Benjamin and I started to make the remainder of the journey alone. We reached Corpus Christi just in time to avoid absence without leave. We met no one, not even an Indian, during the remainder of our journey, except at San Patricio. A new settlement had been started there, and our absence of 3 weeks, induced possibly by the fact that there were houses already built, while the proximity of troops gave protection against the Indians. On the evening of the first day out from Gilead, we heard the most unearthly howling of wolves directly in our front. The prairie grass was tall, and we could not see the beasts, but the sound indicated that they were near. To my ear, it appeared that there must have been enough of them to devour our party, horses, and all at a single meal. The part of Ohio that I hailed from was not thickly settled, but wolves had been driven out long before I left. Benjamin was from Indiana, still less populated, where the wolf yet roamed over the prairies. He understood the nature of the animal and the capacity of a few to make believe there was an unlimited number of them. He kept on towards the noise, unmoved. I followed in his trail, lacking moral courage, to turn back and join our sick companion. I have no doubt that if Benjamin had proposed returning to Gilead, I would not only have seconded the motion, but have suggested that it was very hard-hearted in us to leave Augur sick there in the first place, but Benjamin did not propose turning back. When he did speak, it was to ask, "Grant, how many wolves do you think there are in that pack?" Knowing where he was from, and suspecting that he thought I would overestimate the number, I determined to show my acquaintance with the animal by putting the estimate below what possibly could be correct, and answered, "Oh, about 20. Very indifferently. He smiled and rode on. In a minute, we were close upon them, and before they saw us. There were just 2 of them. Seated upon their haunches, with their mouths close together, they had made all the noise we had been hearing for the past 10 minutes. I have often thought of this incident since when I have heard the noise of a few disappointed politicians who had deserted their associates. There are always more of them before they are counted. You are listening this book at VolantLife Radio. A week or 2 before leaving Corpus Christi on this trip, I had been promoted from brevet 2nd Lieutenant, 4th Infantry, to full 2nd Lieutenant, 7th Infantry. Frank Gardner, afterwards General Gardner, CSA, of the 7th, was promoted to the 4th in the same orders. We immediately made application to be transferred so as to get back to our old regiments. On my return, I found that our application had been approved at Washington. While in the 7th Infantry, I was in the company of Captain Holmes, afterwards a lieutenant general in the Confederate Army. I never came in contact with him in the War of the Rebellion, nor did he render any very conspicuous service in his high rank. My transfer carried me to the company of Captain McCall, who resigned from the Army after the Mexican War and settled in Philadelphia. He was prompt, however, to volunteer when the rebellion broke out, and soon rose to the rank of Major General in the Union Army. I was not fortunate enough to meet him after he resigned. In the old Army, he was esteemed very highly as a soldier and gentleman. Our relations were always most pleasant.